Hip pain. So you want to know how to rehab a labral tear. We've had this question a couple of times now, and I have the master of hip labral tear rehab next to me because he's torn his own. Plus, he's a physiotherapist. So this is going to be a great series. We're looking forward to dive deep into this. Today we're going to reveal a couple of our favorite regression exercises for the stability system in the hip, and we're also going to reveal one of the big mistakes that people make that prevent proper rehab. All that and more coming up right after this. We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image. All right, guys, before we get started, in case we haven't met before, my name is Yanni Bormeister, and along with Richard and my brother Rad, we founded and created UMS, the Unified Movement System, and Unity Gym, where we are here today shooting the show. And to my left is Phil White, who is Dr. Phil, our resident physical therapist, physiotherapist, incredible remedial massage therapist, and just all-round cool guy. How was the long weekend, Phil?
Oh, mate, it was unreal.
Crushed it?
Yeah, pretty shitty weather here in Sydney, but played beach volleyball nonetheless and got smoked in my first tournament. So what better way to spend the weekend,
Oh, sounds great. Sounds great. Well, Phil and I have just come off our morning training session. I actually had to break it up so we could do the show. I'll have to finish my supplementaries afterwards. But if Richard has the camera ready, we will dive straight out on the gym floor and show you the exercises from today's show. We'll give you a good demonstration. And then we're going to come in and really go deep as to why we've selected these two movements as our first two movements in this hip labral tear rehab program, because it's quite insightful. And honestly, I'm learning a fair bit about the hip because I've never had an injury in the hip like this. I've rehabbed one with a client before, but Phil knows a lot more about this topic than me. So it's quite exciting for me because I've learned a few new things today discussing this show as well.
Yeah, so just to give a tiny bit of background before we go out, we're just treating, it's quite a nice follow-on actually from the shoulders that we did last week, because really we're looking at another ball and socket joint, and when you think about ball and socket joints, you've got to think about that 360-degree dynamic stability, because there's so many ranges of motion to be working in. So when we dive out here just now, we're going to be doing some dynamic stability exercises, but the most basic of regression. So we're physio big on sort of functional training, so we want to train towards what sport we're doing, but for people who are just starting from the very beginning, this is the very basic regression. So nice and simple to start off with, which will then get into more complicated.
And that's sort of key to our show, which we're going to dive into in a sec too, you know?
Just a bit of background.
Yeah,
Here
absolutely. All right, let's go. I'm going to take my course notes just in case. My cliff notes, I should say.
All right, knocking things over on the way out here, but here we go.
We're all
right, so
I'm the exercise demo guy today, and Phil's going to have you talking through. So be kind and smash the like button because he's not usually on the lapel mic.
Moving up in the world. Here we go.
That's right.
All right. So this one might look a bit familiar for the people who were tuning in last week for the shoulder exercises. Last week we were doing it with the medicine ball up against the wall. So this is a very similar look here that we've got going where Yanni's just going to be doing little rotations, so even smaller. Slowing it down nice and slow. So what we're doing is we're just providing a little bit of pressure onto the ball, onto the wall, and we're going to get even smaller movements than that, Yanni. We're just going to really...
I'm an overachiever.
Yeah, he likes to push it. You can tell this guy hasn't had a hip injury before. But what we're looking at is making them even slower, even smaller, because what we're trying to do is get those deep muscles of the hip that are actually external rotators, just like the rotator cuff we were talking about last week with the shoulder. They're going to be the muscles that are we're trying to get to really start firing and start turning on, because what they need to do is hold that ball, the actual ball in the middle of the socket.
Feel it burning after a while.
Yeah, so even slow down, smaller movements. So that's where we want to start, okay? So we're just doing back and forth, doing sort of 30 seconds on there until you start to feel a bit of burn. Now we're going to go up and down gently with the ball. So trying to use your hip as the one that's pushing this, so you kind of slide, extension and flexion of the hip, but getting the foot moving up and down, even sort of smaller movements than that and slower. Yanni's, you can tell he's just had another coffee because he's going for it, but even slower. There we go. All right, very nice. All right, and so from there, another 30 seconds. Now, if you need a break, then we can you can pause.
What should I do with my posture? Just repeat the question.
So he's asking
PPT or APT?
Yeah, so he's asking there about what he should be doing kind of through his core for that time. You want to think you want to be active, because remember, this is a very basic progression, so we're going to be moving into movements where you're challenging your whole system. So like ideally just sort of a gentle sort of contraction, but nothing too intense. We don't want to become overactive, overextended, who then walk around like a robot because they're so stiff all the time. So just a gentle sort of keeping your back from being completely arched, just a gentle sort of contraction through the front.
I found that I naturally went into an arch, like in APT, and I had to kind of engage. So
he's finding he naturally will kind of get into that anterior pelvic tilt where you just get that sort of arching through the back on the floor, so he's just doing a gentle contraction to keep it there. Now you can see he's moved into little rotations here as well, so he's going to go one direction for a little while. So we'll go, he's going pretty hard and doing all at once. We'll probably start off going a bit less time. So he's going one direction and then the other. And you can tell he's probably getting a bit tired because he's getting speeding up a bit and so want to slow that movement down.
You really do.
You start to feel it, hey? Yeah. Okay. And so then going the other way. So to start out with, you might, fit all of these into just like 1 minute to start off with. If it's feeling pretty intense by 30 seconds, have a break and build it up. Cool?
I think the key emphasis is to really try and be making the movement from the hip.
Yeah, so you want to be thinking that it's a hip exercise, not a knee exercise, and not an ankle exercise. So if you see you maybe just over-exaggerate ankle movement here, yeah? So see how that's a lot more movement at the ankle and not so much at the hip. But again, it's subtle, very subtle. So you want to be just checking in with your body, see how you're feeling. Are you feeling a deep burn in the hip? If not, reassess and see how you're going. Cool, so we'll pause that one there. Yep. So that's a really nice active dynamic stability exercise. It's getting those muscles that are keeping that ball in the middle of the socket, just like in the shoulder, keeping them fired, turned on to as the most basic of progressions. Now, just like in the shoulder, you would have been, I'm sure you would have, if you've ever had a shoulder injury, you've probably been to a physio doing the external rotations in different positions. It's a very similar thing to start off with. So first up, we're getting into that 4-point kneeling position here. Now to start off with, see how he's got the band attached onto here. It's coming across onto that inside leg. And now, if he was to totally relax that muscle, what would happen is the leg would go out like that. So that position, it can be a bit confusing with the hip because it sort of seems a bit backwards sometimes. But going out into that position, that's internal rotation of the hip. So to bring it back to neutral, you need to use your external rotators.
Just bring the camera around here and I'll show this.
So
come around the front.
Going around the front.
So looking at the front of my femur, my thigh here, if I let the foot pull out, see how my knee internally rotates? So what we're talking about is the femur bone here in relation to the hip. So if I pull my foot back in, the leg is actually externally rotating.
So don't be distracted by what's happening at the foot, just think about what's happening at the
hip.
Exactly. So we're using those external rotators to bring that foot back in, and that means we're using all the muscles of your hip that are doing that external rotation.
That when I was not a personal trainer and I didn't understand human movement, that really confused me. When I had a therapist say, we're going to do external rotation of the hip exercises,
and you start bringing your foot in.
Internally rotating my foot. I was like, how the hell does that work?
Yeah. But think about what's happening at the hip. So this 4-point kneeling is a good place to start. And so to start off with, even just stopping the pull of the band, you can adjust the tension to make it more intense. But that sort of anti-rotation idea is so that band's going to be pulling him into that internal rotation. What he's doing there is just resisting against it. If he relaxes, his leg was going to come in like this. So that's using those active, sort of like an isometric contraction. If you're doing a bicep curl and you're holding it in that one position, this is what he's doing here with his hip. Now that's a nice place to start. Now we're going to start doing some concentric reps. So he's bringing his leg into...
And how far should I go out?
Yeah, not too far, especially if you've got an angry hip. Yep. You don't want to be going too far into that internally rotated position because that's classically what actually aggravates the symptoms. So just, small range is fine, and just controlling the band there. Cool? So in and coming back out. Now it might be a bit uncomfortable having the knee sort of digging into the floor there. So, put a little, like a mat underneath, or even using like a paper plate is a nice way of getting a bit more rotation ability. But yeah, so he's just doing reps here now. Classic Yanni is pushing himself pretty hard here. So
I'm actually getting like cracks in my SI joint from that. It's like opening me up. It feels really, really good.
Yeah, but we're looking for sort of small controlled movements, and if you start to feel like you're pushing it too hard, then you might actually start using other muscles there. So again, it's about those deep stability muscles, because also you've got your glute max, and you've got your, like, it's the biggest muscle in your body. It's an external rotator as well. So if you find that you're like lifting your leg and you're just getting really like forcing it, then you're probably not going to be using those deep stabilizers that we're looking for. So
that was awesome. Let's go back in the
head on in. Just lost the mic there. Hang on.
Mate, that was an awesome topic.
Yeah, it's a...
Thanks, Kai. How are you? And hey, on that note, Kai's just dived in. We've got a few people watching live. Jump in, tell us where you're from. We know who Kai is and where he's from. How's beautiful sunny Noosa? We were just talking about that part of the world this morning.
Hinterland, like the bushland behind it, mate.
That's one of Phil's favourite spots in the world. So we agree, Kai, really good topic, and something that I'm learning a lot from too. I can tell you guys straight away, those exercises out there fired up my glute like there is no tomorrow. I was like, whoa.
I was so surprised the first time I did the ball one, especially when you're slowing it down, you're doing like barely any movement. It looks like you're doing nothing at all, but
I've got fatigue in my glute. Like I feel like I have to go out and do the other leg to balance myself out.
It's probably a good time to start talking about what the actual structures that we're strengthening there are. So just some really basic hip anatomy 101. So just like the shoulder we were talking about last week, it's a ball and socket joint. That one sort of seems a bit more obvious for people because it's when you see a pelvis, it's a really nice deep socket, and you've got the ball of your femur, so your leg bone, just sitting in there. So it's quite different to the shoulder because it's a bit more locked down than the shoulder, whereas we were talking about last week where you get all this amazing range by having quite a shallow joint. This one, it's a bit deeper, and you get the ball sitting in nice and like really quite deep in there. So just like the shoulder we were talking about, you get rotation movements, but you also get gliding movements. So what's so common in these hip injuries is, again, the active structures aren't doing a good job of stopping those glides, and so you start to push up against other structures. So the labrum is a very common part that gets injured, but also the cartilage surrounding the actual joint. So just to differentiate between those two, because that might be a bit confusing, is with every kind of moving joint in your body, you have a nice layer of cartilage there that when you're moving, it's just providing like a bit of lubrication and a bit of shock absorption and support. The labrum is a cartilage-like structure that's sort of a ring, or in the hip it's sort of almost like a triangle that sits in where the ball attaches onto the into the socket there. It's just providing a bit more sort of cushioning, a bit more support. So it has a shock absorbing and kind of holding on role, just like in the shoulder. So when you have a joint that's kind of not very well supported by the active structures, and the passive structures are suddenly going to cop, a bit more of a beating because you're not holding that. You're not controlling that ball very nicely, so you start to get a bit more movement. Now you've also got the joint capsule around your hip as well, and so when you have a tight joint capsule, that's another passive structure that will stop a lot of the movement. But if you've got a bit more of a lax joint structure, which it depends a lot on people, but also what they've sort of spent their time doing, then you're going to get a bit more movement around there. So it's even more important to have that good strength through your active structures. It's so common in dancers, gymnasts who will spend a lot of time doing that passive stretching that they start unlocking these big ranges, but they just don't have the muscular strength to control that range.
Okay. So what are the active structures of the hip that they need to focus on strengthening?
Well, there's quite a few there. So it's an external rotator group. So just like in the rotator cuff, you've got 3 external rotators that we were talking about last week that hold on to the back of the ball to keep it centered in the middle of the socket while you have that anterior movement. And you've got, one internal rotator that does the opposite. So basically it's the same sort of thing is happening in the hip. Now you have every personal trainer's favorite muscle in the world, which is the piriformis, because it seems to be the one that every time anyone has been to a personal trainer, they come back saying, hey, I have an issue with my piriformis. It's a really just such a common thing where I think that like people like to sound like they've got this complicated thing that, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
here's a big word.
It's the one that we use. It's the one that we use to bedazzle new clients and make them realise that we know so much about the body. Yeah, the piriformis. It's a deep glute muscle.
Yeah, 100%. But what they so often miss is that there's like 6 other muscles that are sitting with the piriformis, and they're all trying to do that same thing. So you've got your piriformis, and then you've got your superior and inferior gemellus, and your obturator internus and externus, and then your quadratus femoris, and they're all sort of sitting down in like a group of 6, where it's attaching from the sacrum, so the bottom of your spine, and it's going out into your greater trochanter, which is
the head of the femur.
Well, the head's actually in the socket there, but then you've kind of got this like bony attachment site that's sitting there. So then it kind of comes across and it controls that internal and external rotation of the joint. So we'd like to, just for ease of explanation, the piriformis and the muscles that Phil just explained. The external rotator group. We'll just
the external rotator group. We're going to call that the hips rotator cuff, basically. You know, like it's the system of muscles that provide dynamic stability to the hip and to help do that sort of function of the external rotation.
Yeah, I'm just seeing my hands doing the different explanations of the things. I feel like we need to start getting some models in, or maybe an iPad with something to look at.
Right, hey, that's a really good idea. You guys can what do you call it? Donate or buy some of our programs, and I promise you that the first thing we'll buy is some skeletal models, so that Phil can actually really go deep on this. I'm literally going to add that to the want list, the wish list of equipment. That's a really good idea.
Might be helpful, but I think that the idea of thinking about your hip as having a rotator cuff as well is so important, because it's providing exactly the same role in your hip as it is in your shoulder. Because when I was talking about out there where you've got your big muscles that also that do most of the movement, so when I was saying you really need to control and do small movements, because otherwise your glute max is an external rotator and it'll start to take some of that role. All the muscles that, the big muscles around your hip that you think of when you're training, is your quads and your glutes and your hamstrings, they're all going to be active doing the main movements of the hip. But then you've got those deeper muscles, those rotator muscles, that are trying to control those glides that I was talking about, so you're able to produce a lot of force with those big moving muscles.
Awesome.
You're really looking at the exercise we're doing out there is trying to first get them nice and active, so doing those little external rotations, just like we do in basic regressions of shoulder rehab, is we're getting those muscles to start getting a bit of strength and a bit of neural drive. But then we're also straight away train them to be dynamic stabilizers.
We're turning on the tap. If you've heard Phil talk about neural drive before, he likes to talk about the analogy of a flow of water through a hose or a tap, and the more you turn the tap on, the stronger that neural connection becomes. And this is something that took me a while to learn, but once I learnt it and understood it, my ability to rehab injuries exponentially improved. And that was that there's often a little bit of a disconnect, either through lack of you training properly or from trauma. You have a traumatic injury and your body will tend to want to not restrict movement. That's like what happens with a frozen shoulder in an extreme case. Your body locks down the area, it creates scar tissue, it provides a healing environment, not the perfect movement environment. And there's often a need to sort of retrain the muscle to do its job properly again after that.
And that's why working with the physio is so important, but I feel like so often we kind of get it, physios are often really good at this basic first sort of stage, and then the most important thing is to then get it back to the actual activity you want to do, because you're not going to get anywhere if you're just, only doing the most basic of rehab and you're not teaching it then how to do the movements that you want. So that's why I think just having this connection of a personal trainer and a physio working together, it just has taught me so much about the progressions back to actual return to sport and return to whatever activities you want to do.
That's exactly right. And that's one of the, I think that's probably the biggest mistake, and we may as well reveal that. Before we do, guys, smash up the like button. We've got lots of people on here. If you do appreciate what we're doing here, and you do appreciate the insight that we're giving you in the shows here, then smash that like button. It does help us a lot. The biggest mistake that we see people make when rehabbing the hip is that they don't regress back. It's common to regress right back to muscle activation stuff for the shoulder, but for some reason with the hip, people's idea, in my experience, as an observation, is I'll just lower the weight that I'm squatting, or I'll just go back from squats to split squats, or a single leg movement, which is a regression, but it's often not a regression enough back to this muscle activation stuff, because remember, the hip is very similar. It's very different, but it's also very similar to the shoulder. It's a ball and socket joint. It has a dynamic stability system, just like the rotator cuff. And often that system is what's failing you. Because remember, like any ball and socket joint, like Phil said, you have glide in that joint. It's very important that that joint sits nicely in the socket, and it's the hip dynamic stability system that has to do that.
Yeah, so I think it's probably a good time to talk about the FAI, so femoroacetabular impingement, which is one of the questions that prompted why we're doing this episode today, and
while we're doing this series, we're dropping a whole series on this. So tune in the whole week. We're going to go deep.
Yeah, so FAI and labral tears, like they're two kind of common things. So labral tears are just what I was talking about before with that labrum, where it can start, if you have a lot of that gliding movement or you have a traumatic incident, then you can actually get a tear throughout the structure. But FAI is a really interesting one, and it's something that I've had to deal with, which was I really kind of wanted to push my training and my jump training for when I was playing ultimate frisbee a lot, and so I was thinking, hey, if I can get a really good aerial, then I'll be able to, crush it on the field. But I sort of didn't do all the prep work, and I just went straight into plyometrics and pushed a little bit too hard, which is just, I think, it's so common. I mean, and that's what has really informed my physio practice, is you're constantly coming up against human nature and what you should do and what you want to do. So basically I pushed it, and I was starting to jump loads and doing kind of dynamic contrast training where you're lifting heavy and then jumping without a weight, and it's really, I was getting pretty good results, and I was jumping bloody high, but you're landing in these really sort of flex positions. Now, the issue with and I'm sure anyone who's had FAI is this is when you start to feel it, is you're getting into that flex position down to a deep squat, and you start to feel a bit of pain through the front of your leg there. Yep. Or when you're getting into sort of end range rotation, you start to feel a bit of pain, or you're getting into those sort of end range splits as well as a common one, where you're starting to just get a kind of dull, deep pain that's sort of not always in the same sort of place, but it's there at that sort of end range. Yep. And so what's happening there is you're going into these flexion movements where you're getting that anterior glide, just like the shoulder I was talking about, and it starts to come up against the kind of lip of your hip joint there. Yep. So with FAI, you get two different types. There's cam type, which is when you have if this is the ball of the hip again, so of the leg bone, basically there should be a concave bit here. Yep. So through here, but basically it starts to become convex. Yeah. So you can imagine that, and so that's kind of where the name comes from. It's like a cam lever, where that happens because you've got. It's so common in men, especially who have played a lot of sport in their life, and you're going through these kind of crazy ranges of motion, and you're producing lots of power, but you don't have the dynamic stability to control it. Yep. And so this is your body trying to be hey, we got to bolster this area and really protect it. So you start to get laying down a new bone there, which is the body trying to be helpful once again, but it ends up causing issues down the line because you've got this kind of extra bit of bone here that when you're trying to move your joint through full range, it starts to come up against that sort of deep hip socket and starts to aggravate the actual hip joint itself.
And this is something that Rad's actually experienced, so I know a little bit about it because we had to go down the path of figuring it out. It's very common. It usually develops through adolescence when the individual's like a teenager and they're, as Phil said, playing some sort of sport or athletics where they're doing a lot of plyometrics, a lot of really extreme movement. For Rad, it was rollerblading and skateboarding, and he was jumping off really high heights and crashing down on the ground, and that force was really testing his hips and caused the bones to grow really thick there.
Football players and hockey players have to get down and sort of be producing force while bending over and putting that hip through real range.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's right.
yeah.
Now, what we want to do, we've got to bring this in for a landing.
Just to be thorough about this, is also another type of FAI which is more common in women, and that's the pincer type. So basically, the socket now, it starts to encroach over the ball there. So there's two different ones there, and it's really important to kind of understand that. But often it can be mixed as well. So some people kind of get the it's called a bit of both. Yeah, you get like the pincer plus the cam, so you can really see how that can be quite aggravating. And yeah, it's so important to have that dynamic control and that dynamic stability, because otherwise, if you've got two sort of things that are closing down that space and you don't have any control, then there's no wonder you're going to get sore.
So I just want to reinforce a couple of things before we get to your questions, and we've had a lot of them come through, and we're going to rip through them as quickly. Do you have anyone at midday? No? We can get Richie, you can wrap up again if you want and bring the iPad down here so you can get ready for the show. Richie's got to bail and teach some guys here at Unity, and we'll wrap up with the questions. Now, the key insight from today's show that it's super important that you guys understand, particularly those of you who either have an issue with the hip, or if you experience an issue or have had an issue with the hip before. The biggest issue we see people make is that they don't regress far enough back to stability. And the key insight from today's show is that you got to understand that there is a dynamic stability system that needs to be trained here, just like the shoulder. And it is very similar to the shoulder in mechanism, in mechanics. And therefore, it has the ability to sort of dysfunction in the same way as the shoulder, which can lead to injury in itself, So going back to using some of the movements that we showed you there today, and we're going to progress on those movements tomorrow and for the rest of the week. But for many people, like even myself, who doesn't have any hip issues, that was a workout for me, man. I was like, whoa, if I actually prescribed that in a program format and did a few sets of those movements, my hips would be cooked. So, maybe I'll go on a little bit of a booty building quest and go right back. It's interesting because I know Kalisha does a lot. My partner Kalisha, if you guys don't know, she's right into booty building. She's got a booty project, female fitness program that she does, and she does all sorts of crazy glute exercises, with the key emphasis to really build like that perky bubble butt booty. And I've seen a few of those in there, not the activation, the stability one, but the internal, external rotation. And I always thought, what the hell is she doing? And I'd never tried it myself, but it makes so much sense when you sort of understand how the hip works and everything, So really important that you guys understand that insight that you do have to sometimes take it back to that level of regression where you reactivate the basic stability system in the hip, and that is that internal, external rotation movements. Richie's just going to bring this down. Do you have anything to add to that?
I just want to be really clear. I was just describing FAI and labral tears there, and often, I guess people find out they have these things and think that they're now that's the cause of their pain, and that's going to limit them doing things in the future. Now, there's so much research into imaging and different pathologies, and FAI is a classic where, most of the population will have some type of morphology on imaging that shows you have, cam type FAI, or you've got like a labral tear there. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's causing your hip pain. And there are so many people who have these morphologies, even pretty severe ones, that if you were to image them, you'd think, ooh, these guys are, this is going to hurt. But
this is, hang on, I'll just shut the door and get us some silence. This is something that we mentioned a little bit in the shoulder series that we did last week in regards to my hooked acromion. It's easy. It's really easy, but I think a big mistake to catastrophize those things when they show up, because often, as Phil said, they're not causing you any, another really great example that I found really fascinating was a year or so ago they did a study on the spinal health of elite Olympic athletes. And what came back was astounding. The majority, I think it was 65% of Olympic athletes competing at the Olympics in 2000, I think it was 16 or somewhere around there. It was only the last Olympics or the one before that had disc bulges and major spinal degeneration. And, the types of stuff that people would be like, oh, you can't exercise, or you can't do this, or you shouldn't be bending forward or whatever, with that level of disc bulge. And these are Olympic athletes competing at the highest level who had no clue that they had a compromised spine, you know. And I think that's a really interesting thing for us all to take into consideration.
Yeah,
you know,
it's just so important, and I think it's starting to become more common now, but I think, you just, like, imaging is not the first answer for diagnosis. Like, you've got to see someone who's going to, like, you know, actually talk to you about what you're struggling with and what causes your pain, and that's, like, imaging is kind of a confirmatory thing rather than the primary diagnosis.
Yeah, and it's not the be all and end all. It doesn't mean that if something shows up in an image, it doesn't mean that, that's the end of it.
Yeah,
for you,
it's exciting. It gives you so much hope. Like, the fact that if there's all these people out there who have, like, severe kind of morphological CAM type FAI, but aren't symptomatic, then clearly there's something there that shows that if you're able to, you know, train up your active structures, get your stability really, you know, spot on, then why can't you go back to being pain-free?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's sort of what we want you guys to focus on with this series is to, you know, and this goes for most injuries, you know, focus on good quality movement patterns, functional movement patterns, being able to move your joints in a really good range of motion with really good end range strength, and most injuries will fix themselves. You'd be surprised how much the body will heal itself when you get out of its way and let it heal itself, let it do its job.
I was just looking up some studies about this, and the 2-year follow-up after hip arthroscopies to look at labral tears, like 2 years of people who had surgery and the people who didn't have surgery, exactly the same place.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
you know, there you go. So it's something to take into consideration.
And that's an interesting one because it, like, for them it wasn't a good result either. Like, both people were in pain, and I had a look at the exercise selection that the conservative management people were doing, and wouldn't be what I would prescribe. So I think there's just a lot of hope there that there's so much you can do, and if you just start to train, be smart and train and take these through progressions. So we've started at really basic activations at a level, but we're going to move to make it more and more sort of functionally relevant as the week goes on. Then there's so much you can do. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, well, I want to get through a few shout outs. We've also already mentioned now Beth Gross, thank you very much for the shout out. Pennsylvania, USA. Anyone else watching the show, please let us know where you're watching from, and so we know who you are and we can see who our regular audience is. Kai Tim, I am in rehab from this and have full use of the hip back, yet a feeling of weakness or hesitation to bear weight is still there. Will this go away?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked to this, because I had this back in, it would have been about 2012, 2011. Had a labral tear, and then I've just been, you know, conservatively managing, i.e. exercise, and sort of ignoring it as well, I think is key. You just got to trust your body. It's body resilient. And if you can get back to training smart and get back to your activities, then you'll start to realize you don't really think about it so much. But I mean, I'm back, I run triathlons and I, you know, play beach volleyball on nearly every day, and I cycle to work. I train in the gym, you know, occasionally I'll notice something, but...
If I'll tell you guys, and Kai, this is for you too, if you guys saw the MRI reports from my shoulders, you would go, ooh, Jesus, you know, I've had I've had so many physical therapists say you shouldn't be working out in the gym, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that, your shoulders are fucked, you know, pardon my language, but it's crap, it's absolute crap. I don't think about it at all, and in most cases, in most scenarios, unless I do what I did a few months ago and miss the rack with 65 kilos behind my head and tear muscles in my rotator cuff, which is kind of unavoidable. If I didn't have the flexibility in my shoulders and I did that, it would probably be much worse. But I just focus on really healthy shoulders, having really good, strong passive structures, really good, strong and flexible active structures, and that's it, man. Things just sort themselves out.
You just gotta think about, you know, the exercise that you do on a continuum, and just find that point where you go back and you're able to train things up from a regression, and then move it up the spectrum, make it more and more relevant to what you're doing, and just build up from there.
And I know you, Kai. You are a very smart, very clever, very aware and conscious guy, you have no problems getting rid of that, mate. You just have to not catastrophize it, which is a word I learned from Phil, which is it's very common for us to do. We get real beat up about our injuries and how our body's functioning. Focus on other areas of the body whilst you can't go to the extreme.
The fact he's saying, like, you know, you're a very conscious and aware person, it almost makes me think like, well, that could be worse because you might be thinking about it constantly. And,
that's
and so much of getting past these injuries and pain science, like, I love pain science and I think we should do a deep dive on that one day. But yeah, the less you can sort of like think close in on it and think about how much it's limiting you, the better. Like really start to think about what you can do and start. You know.
I always, you know, when I'm injured, and this is legit, and it's probably pretty funny, but anyway, I really like to position myself as think about what a warrior or a Viking, or in the medieval days, those guys that used to fight on the front line with swords and shields and battle axes and stuff. They suffered the most horrific of injuries in battle, and the best warriors in the world you'd never hear them complaining about their injuries. You know, like they just got on with it and got over it, and
when you think about how
still could be the best warrior in the world.
Because they have big distractions, and you think about how much that little pain would be taking up in their brain. They've got bigger things to worry about.
Yeah, that's exactly
right. It is one of
right.
those things about, like, the more you think about pain, the more you sort of ruminate on it, it becomes worse. So now, in saying that, full disclaimer, like, if you haven't seen a physio about it and you haven't, I guess, got it diagnosed and started working through it with someone, you should definitely do that. Don't always just follow what everyone says on the internet, but I think if you have sort of had it looked at and you know that there's nothing sort of insidious going on there, you've had it properly assessed, then start to build things up.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to get through a few shout-outs because we've had a lot coming through over the long weekend. First and foremost, Alex Zero, what more could we ask for? I hope that's good. He's done a smiley face, so nice. I'm assuming it is. Margaret Wood, it is my target to lower my back. That's in relation to a nutrition video, and she's making a recommendation on something on Google. I know V-Guard Irons, I know you've mentioned them before, but what are those shoes? I love and grow from all your amazing content. I'm assuming this is for Rad, and it is the Fayus, and the Fayus are available on Amazon, or if you just Google Fayus, they're a Kung Fu shoe, originally sort of popularized by Kung Fu, and you can get them on eBay and stuff like that.
Well, they might have been talking about my shoes, these puppies.
Oh, you never know.
They're Allbirds. They're environmentally sustainable compared to most shoes, and they're made from merino wool. So I think you could have been talking about mine, probably not.
Could have been.
Allbirds,
if they are, comment again in one of the videos and we'll let you know exactly where, and I might be able to put a link in there for you. Rachel East was saying, after my damaged my back, I started with simple passive stretches, progressed to PNF stretches on hamstrings, and then started RDLs. I think if I had gone straight into RDLs, I would never have done them again. It's vital to use progression correctly in an uninjured person, but even more so with injury recovery. Absolutely, Rachel. Progressive overload is key.
I'd agree to a lot of that, except I'd just say that sometimes passive stretches are maybe not the best place to start. Obviously, it depends on person to person, and everyone will get sort of different results. But my general beginning of exercise progression for someone with back pain would be about getting people back to some movement. And getting a bit of strength through there, because the spine is all about support. Now, passive stretches are a great way into exploring different ranges of motion, and definitely add them in there gently, but just my 2 cents.
I'm a huge fan, especially around the spine and injury, is you're doing mobility drills first, because it's usually a combination of load and taking it through a range of motion. I don't know what this guy, venture capitalist, Venusaur, scratch and sniff, barely there. I don't know what you're talking about. We'll just skip over that. I have been suffering wing scapula for the last 4 years. Please help. I email for help me to... I've got this guy's email. I will connect with you. That's, I can't pronounce your name, Koirul Islam. I will email you, brother, if you're watching. It was a very lengthy email that you sent us with lots of photos.
Wing scap, have a look at our shoulder function videos from last week.
Yeah. And I'm going to link a couple of videos to start him off with. Brandy Boykin, thank you for this video. This is for the shoulder pain relief exercises warm-up. Just to clarify, do you recommend only the amount of reps that are on the video, 2 times up and down pulsating 4 arm circles each way and 4 to 5 internal rotations, or should one with tight shoulders perform more than that before their workout? And Phil, you've actually responded. Hi Brandy, Phil from video here. It will depend on the type of workout you are going to do. If you are doing a full body split and you don't have long to train, then going through as shown in the video is good. You're probably elaborating to say...
So basically, just when you think about what type of warm-up you're doing, like if this was talking about the quick external, the quick shoulder warm-up that we did last week, where Rad really just blasted through it quite quickly. Yep. Now, if you're doing a full body workout, then just getting a bit of activation through the shoulders is, if you've only got an hour to train, that's like you got to weigh things up, and if time is key, then don't spend your whole time warming up and never actually doing any training. So if you have a bit more, if you're going through a full body, then you probably want to do quickly over your upper body, a bit on your lower body. But if you're doing a full shoulder workout and you have plenty of time, then I'd probably spend a bit longer than we showed in the demonstration. Yeah,
and the other thing to bear in mind is that age is a very big factor in how long you should spend warming up. The older you get, the longer your warm-ups get. Other than, unfortunately, that's just the reality. Okay, next, Laerta Silva has asked, do you have any video that could help me improve my yoga lotus and Uttasana forward bend poses? And she's responding to the shoulder mobility, how to increase overhead mobility. We absolutely do. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Laerta, yeah? And I'm assuming that you're South American or something, Laerta Silva. It's Silva's a fairly common Brazilian surname, to my knowledge. We do. We've got heaps. Just look at any of our hamstring mobility. A lot of the stuff we've done this year, you just have to go back through the channel and have a look. If you search in the channel search bar, lower body flexibility or mobility, how to get flexible, how to get mobile, we've got a whole playlist with stacks of content for that.
Yeah, if it's yoga, definitely consider doing some more of the strengthening stuff to really take it to the next level of yoga, because so often people just get stuck into the stretching aspect of it without building up that strength.
We've had a lot of very experienced 20-year veteran yogis just explode their skill and ability after doing some of our loaded stretching, and it really helps them. So yeah, dive into that. Laerta Silva's also said, should I try to mobilize the lumbar, try to keep it on the floor while working on thoracic mobility on the foam roller? I like to say keep your tailbone or coccyx contacting the floor so that your hips aren't coming off the floor. Other than that, you should be fine. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Luke Yeat, you can do the ring one with a wall. I'm not sure what we're referring to there, but it's in reference to the same video, the shoulder. Okay, 33 Breakers TV. I'm really loving what you are doing, guys. It helped me so much on my skills on dancing, especially I'm 34 years old and I find a huge progress. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for the feedback, brother. We appreciate it more than you can imagine. Michael Sarzan, on the first exercise, you're extending your lumbar spine too much. Now, I actually dived in, Michael, and had a look what you were referring to, because this is a video we did a long time ago, and it's a chest drape on a foam roller, and for that exercise, brother, I would emphatically disagree with you. I don't know where you're coming from there. He's suggesting that doing a chest drape over a foam roller is going into lumbar extension too much.
I think people get so kind of some people get really intense about the back and think hey, this is you're only allowed to go between these degrees, but It's all about the particular person, what you've spent your time doing, as I keep saying. But you look at people like circus people who are doing bloody back bend.
Look, I've got a cousin who's a contortionist for Cirque du Soleil.
Every body is different, and what they've spent their time doing is going to be so different. So for one person, that might be pushing it and causing some back pain, but for other people who
I'll go so far as to say that it's just wrong. You should be moving your spine, and of course it should be progressive. And I think that's what Phil is trying to push home. What works for one person may be a way too advanced progression for another person. And if, Michael, you're experiencing discomfort extending over there, then there is reason to believe that you need it. You need to progressively work up to that and reattempt that movement once you've developed a little bit of flexibility. But that absolutely doesn't mean you should be going around telling people that they shouldn't extend their spine. And I think that's a really big problem with society. We often speak when we think we know something because of a personal experience, but as Phil and any science-backed background person will say, N it does not equal 1, you know, and you are an anomaly. You're not the broader population, you know, and you got to be careful where you give advice.
What I'd say
to.
is N equals 1 does not equal everyone.
Does not equal everyone. That's
and that
right.
means basically like
right.
what happens to one person doesn't mean that applies to absolutely everyone.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, that's right. Sorry. Mike Sack, thank you. Very nice video. Is it any case to make a video for Olympic lifting? This is on how to increase overhead mobility step-by-step guide. Brother, I'll be completely honest. We would not make a video for Olympic lifting, and the reason is we're not experts at it and we don't really know what we're doing. I have done some Olympic lifting in the past, and I've done an Olympic lifting coaching course. That certainly doesn't qualify me as an expert. I'd probably look at someone who specializes in Ollie Lifting. We really like the Pendlay channel from America. They have some amazing content on Olympic lifting. If you just type in Pendlay, I don't know what his name is, but he was an American Olympic lifting coach, and he's got a great channel and some really great video content there.
Yeah, certainly all the mobility work and like the dynamic strength stuff will be really helpful. But yeah, again, you just got to talk about what you.
Yeah, it's a bit out of our lane, brother. We don't do so much of it anymore because we were just banging people up doing Ollie lifting. I believe has to find the individual, not the other way around. It's very hard for most people to achieve a decent level in Ollie lifting, and by a decent level I mean the minimum standard of mastery where you're not just hurting yourself, because they have massive dysfunctions, movement dysfunctions, compromised posture, things like that. And you really need to have your structures mechanically geared towards being able to do that stuff. And most of the Olympic athletes that we watch on television, they start from a very young age and they condition themselves. And as we've spoken about before, becoming seasoned in that sport, it's not something that you can take to really well as an adult unless you're very patient.
Yeah, I'm so jealous. When I was trying to do Ollie lifting, I just started doing a placement at a high school in Sydney, one of the only public schools that actually has a really good gym program. And Kurt Rich at Sydney Boys High, he was getting the year 7s from as soon as they started coming into the gym. They were doing like all the mobility work with dowel rods, so like totally unweighted, but just practicing those movement patterns and getting that that thoracic extension, that shoulder mobility, that strength up. And then by the time they were graduating, these guys are amazing.
The Chinese start the kids when they're 6 years old, and they start doing all those drills, and they've got little kid barbells that they use that are 4 kilos, and it's like they literally start them young. Now, I'm not saying if you're an adult don't start doing Olympic lifting, but I am saying be bloody patient, because there's a very good chance that unless your shoulders and your thoracic spine and all the structures in your hips aren't like brilliantly flexible and strong, you're going to expose yourself in a big way.
Yeah, and you'll just need to make it like your one priority, because the amount of time you need to put into it, you won't be able to fit in all this other stuff that we teach you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I've watched some guys. We got a friend here, Aaron Kroll, who originally started training when he came to Australia at this gym, and he's now at other gyms. He's breaking Australian records in his lifting, in his snatch. He just did 185 kilograms, which is insane weight. And he's, I think, in his early 20s.
Yeah, mid-20s by now. But
mid-20s by now. And he started when he was in his early 20s, So, but I don't know too many people that achieve a really elite level.
Obsessive. He does nothing else.
That's exactly right. We had to kick him out of the gym at times because he'd live here like 7 hours. We'd go, dude, go and eat something or something, like he literally lived in the gym, to achieve that level. And I don't know too many adults after the age of sort of 28, when the body's stopped developing, that become really good and successful at Olympic lifting without destroying themselves in the process. Okay, moving on. Thank you so much for explaining how the rotator cuff works so clearly. This is from Jamie Aditya.
Maybe my hand
positions are right. Was finally able to wrap my brain around why I have continued to injure my shoulder over and over. Have started doing these simple exercises over a couple of weeks, and I'm feeling a huge difference in strength and mobility already. My overall posture has improved greatly as well. Brilliant. Keep up the great work. That's in regards to our shoulder pain relief relief exercise, stability and muscle activation video. Thank you very much, Jamie. That's awesome that you're getting so much out of it. Yeah, we love to hear this stuff because it keeps us motivated to keep going. Belly size, exceptional. Thank you so much. That's for the how to increase overhead mobility. That video is taking off. We're getting so much feedback from it. I think it's had about close to 40,000 views now, so that's awesome. Dave Baxter, this is a big one, so I'm just going to read it out from the start. This is in relation to the shoulder pain relief exercise, stability and muscle activation video we did from the series last week. Dave from Los Angeles here again. This is the best channel out there. Oh, cool. I'm glad I'm reading this one. This is the best channel out there, bar none. And as someone suffering from an elbow-related tendonitis issue as well, I can say that to the guy who wrote in, the broom pronator therapy along with wrist flexion with light weights has been magic. As seen on your newer video, he's linked it there. Go gently with the broom at first. Make sure you assist on the eccentric just as these guys show until your forearm can take it. Also try doing upper body workouts only every other day for a while. Give your forearms a break. For me, deadlifts didn't bother mine, only bent arm pulling and dumbbell exercises which stress the wrists. After about 6 weeks of not doing pull-ups and no dumbbells and hitting the broom every day, my forearm is feeling better and better while still doing plenty of pushing exercises and straight arm pulling and no limits on lower body. And this has all been calculated with what I've learned from this channel. Rock on. Now, there is one thing that Dave has said there that I really want you guys to take out of that because we can all learn. I want to narrow in on the lesson there, which is he didn't stop training. Yeah. He's talking about the fact that he continued doing his deadlifts. He figured out what he could do without triggering the issue, and he got on with the rehab around the issue. And I love that, Dave. I absolutely love that because so often, and we talk about this all the time on the channel, you sustain a really bad injury and then you stop exercising, which is often the worst thing. And Phil and I just had a conversation about this, and I'm so excited if he's really serious about this. He's talking about niching and specializing in tendinopathy, yep. Because it's just such a common issue that we have coming, you know. And I think he could give so much value to the broader community, just becoming an absolute expert on tendinopathies in the body.
In this gym, like you don't get your kind of classic bread and butter physio, like a rolled ankle here and there. It's all these kind of complex overuse injuries from people like training really hard and really pushing their bodies to the extreme. And I think tendinopathy is just such a kind of poorly understood and it's like very hard to manage. Like you do really need to change your behavior, just like Dave has done here, and he's done a really great job of it. Whereas, as I've kind of talked about in previous videos about tendinopathies, like it's all about finding that sweet spot of like too much going over your threshold makes things worse, and going under your under a certain threshold makes things worse. So he's done a really good job there at kind of finding that sweet spot in the middle and building it up. So yeah, great job, Dave. And watch this space. We'll be
smash up the like button and let us know what you think about Phil going deep on tendinopathy so that we can deliver.
And so tendinopathies, like you get them in the elbow, you can, like on both sides, knee, Achilles, like it's such a common thing, and it's just what most people, what's holding most people back from doing the training.
That's absolutely right. Okay, last one on the overhead, how to increase overhead mobility step by step. Nice tips. We'll definitely try this routine, and that was from Linksy, a couple of days ago before the long weekend started. Now, guys, we've just got back from the long weekend here. It was Labor Day in New South Wales, Australia. So as far as I know, Kai, you didn't get a public holiday yesterday, so sucked in. Just quickly before we go, I understand, really appreciate the insight. Kai, Tim had physio work for 12 weeks, so your path is next. Beautiful, brother. Yeah, good work. Good work. See, that's what I'm talking about. He's a smart guy. So guys, we're going to go deep on this topic this week. Tune in again tomorrow. Remember, if you do want to dip your toe in the Unity ecosphere and start getting my blogs based on these shows, then you can download our free flexibility blueprint, which is in the description. If you want to dive headfirst into our inner circle, then get yourself a free month of UMS online coaching, where you'll be able to interact with us in our private inner circle.
Yeah, there's been a lot of chat over that on the weekend.
That's exactly right. Yeah, absolutely. Lots of great questions, and we're doing a video. I think it's this Friday for the group. personally, which might mean that we're not doing a show this Friday to YouTube, but I'll find out. Rad's back tomorrow. So we'll have all three of us back tomorrow. Until then, thank you very much for tuning in. Smash up the like button, get your comments in for the next show so we can give you a shout out. Take care.
See ya.
What do I do?
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, that's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.